Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm your host, Liz Hyman, bringing the rescue boat to your sales challenges. In this ever-changing sales environment, it's easy for leaders to feel adrift. We're here to be the beacon guiding you to success. Each episode, I'm joined by top sales experts and practitioners who have navigated this waters and come out victorious. Together, we'll uncover the insights and strategies that will help you hit your sales targets and grow your business. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Bryn Tillman, Chris Bowen, Renee Bigelow, and right now it's Q4. We're in Q4 already. And what we've just in the last two episodes talked about that it's kind of late to be worried about whether or not you're going to hit your numbers for the year. So we're going to spend this episode really talking about what can you do to starting in advance to hit your numbers for next year, because planning for next year and hitting next year's Q4 numbers starts, in my mind, it starts at least in Q4 of the year before. So we're your Sales SOS podcast crew, and we are here to help you solve your sales problems. Let's dig into this, you guys. When, how do we not get in this situation that we're at Q4 and it looks like we're not going to hit our numbers? Go ahead, Bryn.
Well, how we don't get into this situation is we have to actively be prospecting. Now, that can look like a lot of different things, but what happens with a lot of salespeople is I've got a big pipeline, I work my pipeline, and then once that pipeline dries up, I'm all the way down here, and then I have to start over again. And we need a consistent stream of opportunities. The way that we teach this, the way that we do this is through warm market referrals. Once we have a good, solid group of clients that love us, and by the way, usually there's 5 or 6 or 7 people inside of each client that we can tap into, we need to, on a consistent basis, get referrals or at least permission to name drop so that we have a solid pipeline of referrals that we have conversations with over and over again. The other thing that we have to do is to have consistent content that's going out. Of course, I'm going to say this on LinkedIn, but we need to stay top of mind. I'm going to share a Daryl Prell story that I don't know that he knows, but Daryl was a huge prospect for me at VanillaSoft, and it never really happened. But I had sent him a proposal in SmartLinks. The week he started at AgoraPost, he looked at my SmartLink, and I reached back out to him in his first week. I didn't even see that he had switched jobs yet, but he had looked at my old VanillaSoft proposal and then connected me with the person. And then in a week, I closed AgoraPulse. So I'm just sharing, right? If I did not stay top of mind, if I did not consistently share content and Daryl wasn't out like looking for my SmartLink. He probably saw content and went, oh yeah, Bryn and LinkedIn and maybe, right? And then went and found that old proposal. And then right, all of that happened because of consistent value in the marketplace.
I'd like to build on what Bryn said about referrals. It's really, if you haven't, like I get into, when I start working with a lot of clients, I find that there's not a process for gathering and sharing referrals.
Wait. I have to stop you there. For 1 second. So research shows that like 75% of happy buyers will provide a referral, and only 4% of those have ever been asked for one.
Yes. And it's that's what I'm saying. It's a very common sin, right? And so one of the easiest wins that I find is finding ways to get customers with potential customers and customers with customers to juice that, right? So sometimes I have clients and we do office hours where we have people come in if it needs to be virtual because it's a global base or something like that, right? But I've also, when I have clients who have a local base somewhere where they can go to one market or in their own home market, have an event, invite customers, very happy customers, customers with potential for upsell and prospects, and make sure that they're part of that content, right? Let them talk as much as we want to push for that sale, especially in fourth quarter. And this is something I'm doing with one of my clients right now. We're making sure that we're having this event where the business is pivoting to add new services, right? So we're making sure that they know that we're adding the new services, but we aren't going to preach to them. We're going to have the customers come in and share tips with each other, and then we'll be part of the mix. We know that will juice referrals and get people talking about, oh, they use the customer for this service. I didn't even know they did that. I'd really like to talk to you about that, right? Getting them to talk to each other. And of course, we'll record what they're saying. We'll turn it into content. We'll ask for permission to share quotes. Like this will get that sort of juiced. So whatever way you can figure out, it might be at a trade show, asking customers to come hang out with you at the booth so that they're available to talk to other people when they walk up, whatever it is that you can do that fits with your brand to get customers involved in this really kind of juices and greases those wheels.
I think one of the areas, so I think referrals are obviously great and gold and should be used. One area I think, depending on what you sell and who you sell to and things along those lines, is looking at, do you have partners that you can go to market with that may have more credibility in certain spaces than you do? And if you have those partners, leverage that network as well. I mean, they're partners with you for a reason. And then being able to then go in and you raise your level of credibility when you're in that co-selling type of motion. You just need to have real clear boundaries around where that line is between what you're doing there.
Absolutely.
And
I was 100%. I agree with that. I was remiss in not in saying partners are a big piece of that. The way I explain it is it's about creating a community of people who are aligned on the purpose, right? And who get the same values. And when that happens, everybody helps lift each other up.
Absolutely.
So I want to go to planning for a minute. I'm going to put on my strategy hat.
You're taking it again every time. I want to object. Go ahead. Go for it.
I'm going to put on my strategy hat for a minute and talk about what does it mean to create a strategy to hit next year, and what are the KPIs and how do you track to make that happen? So Bryn brought up KPIs in the last episode. So the first thing is pulling a number out of thin air is not a strategy. Can I get an amen on that?
Amen.
That is not a strategy. We need to increase sales 10% over last year. Go. That's not a strategy. There's nothing strategic about that. It's arbitrary. I call it wagging your sales force. You made a wild ass guess. You're just going to make your sales force do it. So the first thing is be strategic. Pick numbers that are strategic and understand the resources that are required to hit that number. You are going to be surprised if you do not allocate the resources necessary to hit the number. So the first thing is to really figure out, who are we selling to? What are we selling? Which products we're selling to whom? How much do we need to sell to hit our number? How many leads do we need to get? And I know everybody's screaming and yelling now, sales is not a sales number. It's not a numbers game. It's all about quality. Well, you have to have quality conversations and you have to have enough of them to hit your number. So the first thing is figure out what it's going to take to hit the number. What are the resources? Figure out your strategy to get there, who's doing what, and then manage it along the way. So what I hear so often in funnel reviews, we do our quarterly and weekly funnel reviews. I'm with them all the time doing funnel reviews. What do you do in your funnel review? Oh, what's closing this week, this month, this quarter? What's closing this week, this month, this quarter? Guess what's going to happen at the end of Q4? If all you ever looked at, what was closing this week, this month, this quarter, you have to know that what's at the top of your funnel, and you have to keep track of what's flowing through at what rate. Because if you're not tracking that the whole year, you're always going to be scrambling to hit your quarterly and yearly numbers. That's my rant, you guys.
Okay. Building on that wonderful rant, I got a whole bunch of more additional rants. I want to repeat some of what you guys already said here. Number one, I said was revisit your funnel math, performance, and assumptions at each stage, and challenge one another on how to improve them for the next fiscal year. What are the roadblocks? How can you expedite issues, make them more efficient, streamline the process, et cetera? So exactly what you just said, which was number 2, and this is 2 because these often as a RevOps team, is revamp your systems. It could be as simple as the form and how long it is on your website, for example, to remove roadblocks, increase your velocity of your sales cycle so you can get more deals done in the same amount of time with the same resources. So you don't have to spend more money and your margins increase. Number 3, people talk about this all the time. I actually rarely see this done. It's going to blow your mind here.
Ready.
Survey customers and the ones you lost to understand why they did or didn't pick you, what they would need to remain a loyal customer and not churn, and why they chose the competition or why they choose not to go to the competition. And then, crazy thought here, adjust your products or services roadmap to leverage this newfound knowledge. So classic case in point. When I was at Agorapulse, we were always being asked why we weren't getting a higher deal size. And they would look at the competition and say, oh, you lost to the competition and they get a higher deal size. Well, yeah, because you know what? They had CRM integration and we didn't. And it's hard to get an enterprise deal and an enterprise price point without CRM integration. Sounds really simple. That's the idea of doing this interview things, and you adjust your product roadmap accordingly, which we did, by the way. You guys already hit referrals. That's fantastic. The other thing I said here was repeating what we said in previous episodes, meet with the investors and the board members to understand what they're going to be prioritizing in the next fiscal and factor that into your own plans. Another one here, then building upon what was just said, build out the related OKRs and the KPIs to support attainment of those OKRs for the next fiscal year. And actually, this is crazy. And actually make sure you follow the whole OKR process as opposed to just putting them on a spreadsheet and then scrambling on the last day of the quarter to get it caught up so you can be ready in time for the meeting where you all just bullshit and say you did it and you know you didn't. So there we go. That's editorial by Daryl, free of charge.
It's very powerful, and those are really, really important. And I think the bottom line is we have to be conscious of what we're doing. We can't just keep spinning the same wheel and going in that same direction without stopping and taking a look and really deciding I'm going to go back, you guys, it's a long time ago. Do you remember? This is my first job at Dun & Bradstreet. I would have a meeting with my manager and we would do stop, start, and continue. What are all the things that you've been doing that we need to stop doing because they're not working? What are all the things that you haven't been doing that we think will be good that we should start doing? And what's really working? Continue doing those. And I think just taking that perspective can make all the difference in the world.
Love that.
I want to go back to this idea of KPIs, and I want to go back to this idea of looking at the funnel. These two things. The first is many of the companies that I work with, they don't start tracking their leads in the funnel until they're putting together a proposal, which means that my belief about my sales cycle is very wrong. And in most cases, when I start actually tracking the top of the funnel, they'll find that their sales cycle is not the 3 months they think it is, but it's actually 9 to 12 months in first conversation. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think that you have to start trying. The thing that you have to get people really comfortable with is if you're tracking things from that early stage, you have to and should expect a fair amount of churn, right? You're going to have things that fall out of that early stage. That's where you want them to fall out. You want, by the time you get to that proposal stage, that you've got a better than 50-50 chance of winning that business, right? Because you should have a better understanding. You should have clear, hopefully been able to influence what they think is important, why it's important to them, what it's going to mean to their business, and then being able to drive that forward. If you're only waiting until you get to that point, you're missing all of the other conversations that have had to take place. You don't have probably a really realistic view of a map of that account and who has power to make this decision, who has the power to say no, right? And being able to understand that dynamic is really, really important, especially as you're moving into more complex and larger deal cycles.
And if I'm not tracking the top of the funnel, if I'm starting midway through, I really have no idea how I'm positioned for 9 to 12 months from now.
Right. Well, and I think there's also a fair amount of that stuff that you may have stuff that hits your top of the funnel, and maybe it's not a no, but it's a no right now. Maybe that's somebody that in a year they're back at the top of the funnel and they're ready to move. So maybe they're 9 to 12 months from a year from now, but because you had them there, hey, I need to go revisit, right?
So as we're looking at KPIs, top of the funnel KPIs are important. I'm less concerned about how many phone calls you make than I am about how many new leads you put in the top of the funnel, how many of them moved into qualify, and how many then moved into solutions. So when we're setting KPIs, so many companies are doing things like, you need to do 50 dials a day. Well, if you're a BDR and all you do is dial, then you have to have your daily dials. But if you're a sales rep who's doing a whole bunch of different work, then how you get those deals in the top of the funnel are not as important as that they're there. Did they come from a referral? Did they come from a download on the website? Did they come from you finding a new deal in an existing client? Is it somebody you used to know? Whatever it is, get them in the top of the funnel and measure it. But if you are wondering why you never know if you're going to hit your quota a year from now, it's because you're not tracking. And again, if you have a really short sales cycle, you won't know. But you probably are nurturing people online way before you ever start having conversations. What else? Go ahead, Renee.
I'll add one that I run into fairly often, and that is particularly, I would say, more in the startup world, where things are kind of new. Yes, we always want to see that up and to the right? And with a startup, you're growing, so you expect to see that. So, but one of the things I often see is is neglecting to include any cycle, any buying cycle in your forecasting. Right. So everybody knows fourth quarter in retail, right? But I've had I remember having a congenial but continual argument with a CEO about business isn't cyclical. Right. And I'm like, it may not be, but the people inside it are. Right. Like you're going to have a dip in the summer because of vacations. You're going to have some dips for things around the holidays. It might be new leads you have a big dip on for around the holidays, but you can close a lot in that week between Christmas and New Year's. But you have to understand what some of these cyclical things are that are going to happen. If your customers have a cyclical routine and rhythm, then you're going to, even if your business you think is immune to it, right? So really, it's a common thing I see, particularly with newer management or a younger company, right? It's just kind of evenly spreading things because we're expecting to see steady growth without really thinking through what that cyclical pattern how it could affect your numbers and your KPIs, right? And so if you're going to have a little bit of a soft, the one I see pretty regularly is like end of second quarter, beginning of third quarter in B2B. Like it just gets a little soft because of all those vacations. If you know that's going to happen, then you got to pad on the times where you have a little bit better opportunity to close because the people are around, right? So like that even spread is one that I find bites people a lot.
So KPIs or OKRs, we need to really think about what are the numbers that matter. What do we need to be tracking? So again, I will always harp on looking at the entire funnel. I always look at things like, what is your next conversation going to be? If your salespeople can't tell you throughout the course of the year, what their next conversations with the deals, the people in the deals that are higher up in the funnel, they're not working them. And you know what happens? That's when stuff falls out of the funnel because I look at it and go, I don't remember who that was, which I personally have done more times than I'd like to admit, right? I don't even remember that person. I don't remember that conversation. I have no idea where we left things or what I'm supposed to do next. So the best I can do is call and say, I'm just following up, which is going to go nowhere. So, if you're looking at KPIs, it may seem like a silly KPI, but do you have next actions on every single deal in the funnel? Because if you don't, you're losing stuff just because you've forgotten about it.
Oh, I love that. I mean, building what you said, this is for the sales audience out there. Understand this. when management gives you KPIs, it's and you like bitch and moan because you have them, and then you have to scramble to update the CRM so they can actually report on those KPIs. And your answer is, this takes me away from selling. I don't have time for this. You have got it backwards. Those KPIs, exactly as what was just said, are there for you. So you help you understand what you need to do to hit your quota so we can pay you a boatload of money in commissions. This is a team. This is not about management against the reps. This is, and really it comes down to, what the best advice I can give you here is, it's all about attitude. Talk about KPIs. It's attitude as well, right? It's understanding that we want you to be successful, and you just have to, let us help you where we can. Now, I understand there's a number of sales leaders out there who have the ability, the tact and delivery of a bull looking at a red blanket. Yeah. Okay. But, that's a whole different conversation.
I'll add to that because this is one I encounter a lot, and this is kind of fits in culture, but it also fits in, like, there's a lot that we are asking salespeople to do beyond sales because they're part of a company, right? And like a lot of really great salespeople, and especially in industries where I've been involved where it's 100% commission, right? They view it as their own little business, right? Their list is their business, but they are a part of a company, right? And there are things that there are great benefits to being a part of a company, literal benefits, right? That, things that you get by being part of a company. Maybe you have a better product to sell than if you started your own business, right? Whatever it is, you're a part of a company for a reason. You get benefits to it. You have to contribute to the team too. And sometimes contributing to the team is helping with the knowledge and expertise and data that you can help contribute so that the team can make better decisions, so the company can operate better, right? So it's not just, if I go sell, I make my numbers and I'm an individual entrepreneur, right? Like it's both and, right? And to that point, I think I really like also seeing a behavioral. Liz, you kind of talked about this when you talked about having a KPI for next actions. Those are behavioral KPIs. So whenever you're trying to achieve and like change management, I hate the term, but whatever change you're trying to get in your sales department, if you have a new CRM, if you have a new pipeline flow or process, if you have a new way leads are coming in, or you're asking BDRs to do something different, whatever that is, having a good KPI around the behavioral change gives you something to kind of celebrate as a team. I think is really important too, because we're asking them to hit numbers, but we're also asking them to do things. And those behavioral KPIs can make a big difference in the number of KPIs.
I think the KPIs are important. And I think that when you measure stupid KPIs, excuse me, I guess that's not fair. You get your sales team irritated. One of my clients, we had a long talk about the fact that somebody in the company decided that a meeting didn't count as a meeting unless it was 40 minutes long. What has that got to do with your client? Has nothing to do with your client or the conversations your client needs to be having. Now, if you've got clients that are strategic partners and you want to say they're strategic partners, we need to somehow be having 4 meetings a year with them. You need to make them valuable. Great. But to put a KPI around how many minutes a meeting is silly. So are we measuring the right things? You guys have heard me tell the story before. This young woman who was exceeding quota, outselling everybody on her team, and in trouble every week because she didn't make enough outbound dials. Yep.
I've had where a touch doesn't count unless there's a conversation. Really? I bet you Bryn and LinkedIn would say a touch still counts. If you're making outreach and you have a conversation, it's not. Anyway, I love you.
Yeah. I think that like you said, a 40-minute conversation. How many of us have been in meetings or calls that were scheduled for an hour, but could have been finished in 20 minutes, right? That call should finish in 20 minutes. That was the appropriate time for that call. Nobody's going to complain if you let them off early, right? Like if you're finished 40 minutes early, people will find a way to allocate at least a portion of that time. I'm not going to say that it's a perfect reallocation of that time to profitable activity, but they'll find a way to make it more valuable than sitting on 40 additional minutes of a call that needed to end 40 minutes ago.
So if I can just throw out, I think one of the most important things we can do is set an agenda and ask the agenda, right? So here are the things I'm hoping to accomplish on this call. What are you hoping to get? So at the end of this call, we know we covered all our points. When those points are covered, you're done. And I can't tell you how many people say, okay, I'm going to give you 20 minutes back in your life. They're like, this is amazing. They love, and I make sure that they know how much time they're getting back, because that's a plus. And if I'm on a coaching call and we hit a place and there's 20 minutes left and they bought an hour or whatever that is, I will say, let's stop here and we'll schedule another 20 minutes in 3 or 4 days. I want you to implement this and then we'll come back. So they feel like I'm not taking away their time, but I am not going to waste this time. We are where we need to be. We accomplished what we needed to accomplish. And let's regroup again with that 20 minutes when you need it. So yeah.
What should we be measuring, you guys? What are the KPIs or OKRs that matter?
First conversations with the right people. That is the number one thing as a sales leader that we need to look at. How many first conversations are we having with the right people? If we don't have first conversations, no other KPI matters in the whole world. And if we make 120 calls a day and there are no first conversations, who cares?
Right.
Who cares that we made that many? If we have 17% open rate in email, but there are no conversations, who cares? So all I wanted, how did you get a conversation with the right person? And by the way, it doesn't have to be a sales conversation. It could be an interview for a blog post. It could, the very first rapport building conversation. Maybe it's a networking conversation that might become a sales conversation. Maybe it's an insights call. I will have a call with someone around helping them with a challenge. And then they'll say, oh, well, how can I work with you? And I'll say, that I appreciate you asking that. Let's set up another call. I don't want to bait and switch them because I said that this was an insights call. I also want enough time to talk about it. I don't want it to be an afterthought. And at the end of that, they're like, wow, that was really about me and bringing value to me. So that to me, that was not a discovery call, but it was a call with the right person, building rapport and bringing value. I think that is the most important KPI.
Okay, what's the second most important?
I'm torn. Go ahead.
Yeah, go. What are the ones you're
So
working
I'm torn.
on?
One of it is how many people in the account have you talked to? So because there's always, we talk about, how many touches there are, but the buying committee is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't think the buying committee is the right word anymore. The people who are influencing the decision, it's just gotten massive. But the reality is, when you talk to those people, they also give you incredible insights on the needs and the politicking and the decision-making process and the features and the functionalities and the influencers and the decision makers that you often don't get from one person, which reps rely on over and over again. So I want to know I want to track how many people in the account you've talked to ongoing and what you've learned from it. The second thing I want to track is I want to track the average duration it takes to have the next conversation. So if a conversation, according to Bryn, is number one, which I'd agree with, I want to know how long is the next conversation? Because we talked about it already. And what we see is so many reps don't do that next conversation, or they wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 3 months because they're distracted or they suck at a follow-up. And that's when accounts go cold. So to Bryn's point, if she hadn't kept on top of me in that Vanislav Agorapalt story, then she might not have got the deal, but she did. And ironically, she got the deal at the next company, right? So it's that whole frequency of touch. And there's lots of ways. You don't have to have a phone conversation every part of the deal. It can be email. It can be social media outreach. It can be, an interview for a piece of content. Because even then, informal conversation takes place where you learn stuff. It's all about moving the ball forward. If I don't see any movement forward, then you're going backwards.
As I've talked about before, I mean, sometimes it's a text message, right? And if you're at that point in the relationship where you're able to do that, like that's an easy way to get quick answers to hopefully things that are meaningful to both of you.
And I don't know if I have a KPI to measure this one, Exactly. But I do think it's really important to be looking at removing junk from the funnel, right? So, the CEO looks at it and goes, everybody's funnel's full. Why isn't anything closing? You're like, and I'm like, because there is nothing in that funnel that is going to close. It's just junk. And so if you have stuff sitting in Qualify and it's sitting in there for 9 months, it's not real. So how much, what percentage of the funnel is real? And I don't know how you measure that in a KPI, but it's definitely part of the conversations that you're having. We shouldn't be afraid to eliminate the stuff that's not going to move forward or move it to someplace else, to a nurture list or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that has to happen in your sales manager, sales rep calls, right? Like they need to be having those conversations to really understand what's real and what's not. It's real easy to plug all sorts of stuff into the CRM, but if you're running the right metrics, running the right reports, and looking at that stuff and having conversations about those deals, what is it going to be to get to the next step? Knowing when that's going to happen, who it's going to happen with, who has to be included, who from our side needs to be included in that conversation. If there's other people, technical people, what have you, that helps start to get people forcing to think around those things and kill the stuff that's not real, because a bloated pipeline doesn't do what you may think it does.
Okay, so let's wrap up. Bruni, yeah, go ahead.
Because I think fourth quarter is when we're looking at and setting a lot of things for next year. And I think this one is pretty critical. That is one of the top, when you say what is the top KPI that you need to have, I mean, I think a lot of the ones that you all named are almost evergreen, right? Like those are just, should always be there. And a lot of people don't have them. So they're really important for them to know them. But I also think it's really important to look at what's happened this year. As Daryl said, if you are surveying customers, if you're surveying employees, if you're looking at your own data and you uncover where your blocks are, where your friction is in your sales process now and your customer journey, figuring out what the most important thing that you could fix next year, that you could really zero everybody in on, and setting a KPI for that. It's kind of a marriage of that numbers and behavior, right? Like, what is the thing that we need to do that will fix? Like, is it having conversations? Is it getting people to come to calls? Is it getting enough people in the cover? Whatever that one thing is, I think that generally is one thing that needs to be on your KPIs for next year so that it gets addressed.
So I hope all of you hit your Q4 numbers. We are rooting for you. That wraps up this episode of Sales SOS Podcast. And that's a wrap of this episode of the Sales SOS Podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope today's episode has equipped you to navigate the sales seas with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to the Sales SOS Podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday, or share your questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. Until next time, keep sailing towards those sales goals. I'm Liz Hyman, your captain here at the Sales SOS Podcast, saying smooth sailing and successful selling.